Let's get week 8 kicked off with some more fantasy football lineup advice. In this episode, I'll be talking 5 wide receivers I'll be putting in my lineups here for this week's games. These are players between game scripts, situations, and more. I like the outlooks for them to produce 10 or more points in our half PPR scoring formats and to be viable lineup contributors for this week's game. So, as always, if you're new around here, my name's Gavin. You're watching the Sizzle Fantasy Sports YouTube channel. And if you haven't already, drop down, click that subscribe button, and turn the bell on so you're never late for a new piece of content or a new video here on the channel. So, with that being said, let's not waste too much more time. Let's get cooking and let's dive into today's episode. You know, in the time that I was here switching over scenes from the intro screen over here to our player database, I was thinking through in both start episodes for running backs and receivers. I said, let's get cooking at the end of the intro. And now I'm starting to, have like flashbacks to let Russ cook, and that just seems like this is a foreshadowing for things to go terribly wrong. So based on that alone, if you want to completely take the opposite advice of what I have for this week, I wouldn't blame you. So to get started here in all seriousness, Chris Godwin of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers is my first must-start receiver for week 8. Now, things have not been going great here, and things, let me rephrase that. Things haven't been going great from an overall box score productivity standpoint, but there's been so much opportunity for Godwin to have here. And I feel like if you just keep swinging the axe here, eventually he's going to break through and have one of these monster games. And at a point, the quality of targets he's receiving isn't excellent, but there's so many of them, and there's so many opportunities that on a short week even here, I'm willing to still in PPR formats roll Godwin out into my lineups and give him the chance to be a starter for my leagues. The Baltimore Ravens right now, the matchup for Tampa Bay, again, on Thursday night. So, again, this is probably risky of me to put this as the first player in today's episode, just given the fact that some of you will be watching this Friday or Saturday, and he could have already busted on the game. But they're 27th in opposing, points allowed to fantasy football wide receivers. So that being very poor and in the favor of Chris Godwin here. The game script for me isn't a huge factor this week. The Bucs are 1.5 point underdogs. So basically what this comes down to is the target volume he's been receiving since he's returned from his hamstring injury a month ago, and the fact that this matchup, once again on paper, looks to be very solid. So you've got a short turnaround, like I said. This Tampa Bay offense has been awful. A lot of the passes thrown to Chris Godwin have been straight into the dirt and just haven't been materializing in much here. But there is one constant, and that is the opportunity that Chris Godwin's seeing in the overall looks he's getting on a per-game basis. He's had 8 or more points every single week. I know it doesn't sound great, but it is what it is. He is having a high floor. In that sense, he's not necessarily delivering the ceiling numbers you want to see, but since week 4, which was his return date, he's been fairly solid. I get it. His productivity is not moving the needle for you and frankly winning games, but I do have a level of trust here and think that in this matchup, after seeing 41 targets since that week 4 marker, this hopefully can bode well for him and point the needle in the other direction in terms of the track his fantasy season is on so far. Amari Cooper, Cleveland's taking on Cincinnati this week. I really, really like this one. So for Amari Cooper and the Browns, they are 3.5 point home underdogs, so the Bengals are coming to town. And at the end of the day, you're going to see here that I think Cleveland just needs to score points in this game. I think that Amari Cooper's had his best success this season when facing poor opposing pass rushes where Jacoby Brissett can sit back unhurried and deliver the football unpressured. And the other circumstance is simply games like against the Los Angeles Chargers where this team just knows that they have to score. So for Amari Cooper here, I think this is one of those matchups. Cincinnati's offense the last couple of weeks has been on absolute fire, and Nick Chubb running and pounding the ball for 4 quarters I don't think gets the job done this week. So Cooper, I expect to see inflated opportunities this week, see him get closer to 7, 8, maybe even an upside of 10 or 11 targets. I think that it'll be one of his more solid games of the season in that aspect, at least in the Jacoby Brissett era here. I'm feeling good about this one. Again, they're home underdogs. They're a situation where, Cincinnati's got some decent pass rushers. They probably get home to Jacoby a couple of times, but at the end of the day, I do think he'll be able to get the ball out, and this is the best pass catcher on this team, and it isn't very close. Njoku's out this week as well, so potentially, as I'm talking through this, maybe an opportunity for a guy like a David Bell to step up a little bit more. Definitely would not be starting him, just thinking through this. Kind of my dynasty brain is churning right now, pinpointing a possible breakout date for him. But we'll move into the next player here. This is not a dynasty episode. This is simply I'm starting Amari Cooper this week with confidence. I think you should as well. Chris Olave, this one keeps working out for me. Chris Olave has been incredibly dependable for fantasy lineups. Right now, he's the PPR wide receiver 19 despite missing a game here, and he's just doing everything well. He is on time, breaking out of his routes. He is able to be wide open in many circumstances, and he's producing regardless of quarterback play. And there's really not much else you could ask for as a fantasy wide receiver that you acquire for your team. So for Olave, the case is simple. I think that you're looking at a player in a matchup where you could get Jameis Winston back this week, possibly. We don't know the official answer to that question yet. So you could see some more deeper target opportunities for him to take the top off the defense. But overall, this Saints wide receiver room continues to be very banged up, beaten and battered every week. We don't know yet at the time of recording this video the health and status of Jarvis Landry and Michael Thomas, but those guys have both missed multiple games. So I feel very comfortable that Olave is target number 1 for this offense. So I'll be rolling him out, again, like I said, with confidence. He's got 4 straight 14-point games or higher here. And I think, to be honest, he's established himself as the wide receiver 1 here. Availability is a skill, and he is the most available receiver in this offense. Jarvis Landry and Michael Thomas no longer are those players. So you can fight me all day in the comment section. I think that Olave is a better player today than Michael Thomas is. You can fight me about that if you disagree. At the end of the day, I think he's just a spectacular route runner, can do things vertically that Michael Thomas only dreams of. And at the end of the day, he has chemistry and rapport with these quarterbacks because he's making plays with them, and because honestly, during training camp, he was working with multiple units between the starting group and got action with multiple quarterbacks. So it's working out here from a fantasy perspective. This is the receiver to own in this offense, and he has not really let us down in rare occasions in terms of when he's actually available for lineups. Michael Pittman, Indianapolis, taking on the Washington Commanders here now. Things did not play out last week the way I expected them to for Green Bay playing the Commanders, but we know the dumpster fire of a situation that team is offensively, especially at the wide receiver position, the inconsistencies and undependability of that football team. So while others are bailing on Michael Pittman with the quarterback change in Indianapolis this week, I'll be staying put and starting Pittman with confidence here. I think it's fair to demote him into the wide receiver 2 territory in terms of our assessment of him. But I will, again, continue to play him with confidence. I think that Sam Ehlinger will give him some downfield passing opportunities and give him some looks to make plays that maybe Matt Ryan wasn't doing as much. I think that at the end of the day, this is still the alpha wide receiver 1 in this offense. And the Commanders are still a poor team against opposing fantasy receivers. They improved just 1 spot last week from 27th to 26th. So they're still a bottom 8 or bottom 3rd NFL defense against opposing fantasy receivers. Roll Pittman out there. He's had 1 game with 8 targets or fewer. So very, very high levels of volume in terms of a team that we think of as a run-first unit. The opportunities are there. The matchup is there. And I think the quarterback play will sustain itself to an extent. I mean, let's not pretend like Matt Ryan has been this elite QB for Michael Pittman and his overall value to respective the Colts offense here. And then finally, Devonta Smith, the Philadelphia Eagles taking on the Pittsburgh Steelers at home. You're 10.5-point favorites here, and I think you're just catching a situation where there will be multiple pass catchers. Maybe it's Dallas Goedert instead of Devonta Smith, but I do think that 2 fantasy lineup-worthy starters come out of this offense this week at the pass-catching positions. I think Miles Sanders does as well. A.J. Brown's the easy one, of course, to chalk up here. But either Goddard or Smith can be penciled in for the second slot. Now, I think Smith has a good chance to make the most of this matchup because the secondary for Pittsburgh has been getting absolutely annihilated. They had another tough game against Miami early. They kind of shaped things up a little bit, but this team's coming off a bye, this being Philly. They're very, very cinched up. They haven't had many problems and struggles offensively prior to that bye week. So I think the best thing for this team is, feed and spread the football around the field. And we know how good Smith is. He's a 1B receiver in this offense, not necessarily a number 2. He's a player that can walk out here and put up double-digit opportunities. He's had, in his last 4 games out here, he's had 2 double-digit target performances, and in the third, he had a touchdown. So that resulted in 12.5 or more fantasy points in 3 of his last 4 outings. He's been very reliable in that sense. He started the season off a little bit slow here, but now we're kind of off to the ground running for Devonta Smith, at least heading into the bye week and hoping he can continue that success here for this week's game. So, of course, if they're hanging up a lot of points as well, Pittsburgh Pittsburgh is 31st against opposing fantasy receivers. So basically all of these players, with the exception of Amari Cooper against Cincinnati, are playing bottom 8 defensive units for the amount of points they've allowed to this position group. I like your chances here. I like the opportunity at the table. So to recap, Chris Godwin versus Baltimore, Amari Cooper versus Cincinnati, Chris Olave against the Raiders, Michael Pittman against the Commanders, Devonta Smith against the Steelers here, and I feel like I'm missing one last note here for today. I knew I was missing something, and this part's brutal. So if you guys, obviously want to roast me, you can in the comment section below. I forgot to recap last week as I literally just broke my glasses off my face. So we have last week in week 7, our track record was 2 of 5, so obviously not very hot. We were white hot on the running back picks. Receivers was not the case this week. We had a very poor week picking fantasy receivers. We went 2 of 2 to start Thursday Night Football, and then I jinxed myself. I told my roommate, I was like, hey, we're killing it this week. We started out with D-Hop and Olave hitting, and then we went into Brandon Cooks, flat out miss. Tyler Lockett and Allen Lazard were near misses. Allen Lazard got hurt, but it was late enough in the game that I'm not going to pull him from this and make the numbers look a little bit better than they were because he was out there for, I believe, over 3 quarters. So he is in an arm sling. You're going to hear him talked about in a different episode this week, but wasn't our best game picking for week 7. That's all right, though. For Lockett and Lazard, they both scored over 8 fantasy points. Our threshold is 10, so they didn't totally miss it, but of course the point is that they do hit it. So not going to give myself credit where it wasn't due there. Those were our 5 picks, though. One more time, I will recap it. The outro's been a little bit long here. We had Chris Godwin, Amari Cooper, Chris Olave, Mike Pittman Jr., and Devonta Smith as our 5 starters for this week. So if you guys enjoyed today's episode, smash the like button, subscribe, turn the bell on, and I'll see you in a future episode. Peace out.